let him in.
Tumbling, burning with white-hot fire, I plunged into the depths of the abyss. Unspeakable pain, relentless agony. Time ceased to exist. Only this torture and a deepening hatred of the hypocrisy that damned me to this hell. An eternity passed, and my torment receded, bringing me back from the precipice of madness. The descent had destroyed me, and yet I lived.
Raziel, you are worthy.
Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to another sketch and review, where I draw something from the thing I'm reviewing. This time, I'm going to be talking about the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver remasters. But, before I get into the review, I want to talk a bit about the picture I'm drawing. When I started working on it, I wasn't sure what style I wanted to do this in. I go back and forth between kind of semi-realism with digital painting and comic book style with digital inking. The only real difference is whether or not I do line work and cross-hatching like you see in comic books. It started off kind of somewhere in between, and by the time I got to coloring it, I'll be honest, I hated the way it turned out. I think the pose is too compacted, I got some of the perspective wrong, and realized that Raziel holds the Reaver blade in a way that comes out of his palm and not like a normal sword. So, just everything was kind of fucked up. And yes, I'm criticizing my own art. However, once I got done coloring it and looking at it some more, I just said, fuck it, and did some line work over the finished painting and changed some of the layer opacities to make it look more like a comic book cover. And I think it fixed most of the problems. I mean, hey, not every piece of art that every artist does is going to be a winner, but thankfully I think I saved this one. Essentially, I kind of worked backwards on this drawing without realizing it, so stick around and you'll see what I mean. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. Alright, so a little history first. And this is important since it ties directly into why I admire these games so much. Now, this can get a bit confusing, so bear with me. Soul Reaver 1 and 2 are part of the Legacy of Kain game series. The first game being Blood Omen, released in 1996 for PlayStation and PC. I think it was also on the Saturn, but let's face it, no one owned a Sega Saturn. Well, maybe like 5 people, but anyway. The order of the games, and here we go, are Blood Omen, Soul Reaver 2, Blood Omen 2, then Defiance, which sees you play as both Kain and Raziel, since the Blood Omen games feature Kain as a protagonist, and the Soul Reaver games feature Raziel as a protagonist. And Defiance is probably in my top 5 games of all time. Confused? Good. I know, it's a crazy timeline that the Legacy of Kain games have if you get into it. Moving on. So, the Legacy of Kain games take place in a world called Nosgoth, where both humans and vampires live in peace and harmony with one another. I'm just kidding, they hate each other's fucking guts. One day, a nobleman named Kain gets attacked outside a pub and is mortally wounded and on the brink of death. He dies. So, Kain gets resurrected by a wizard named Mortanius and is mentored by a vampire named Vorador on how to become the ultimate badass, whereas a ghost named Ariel tries to steer Kain in a direction that would restore balance and order to the land and potentially ridding the vampire menace. Blood Omen sees Kain set off on a journey to try and cure his vampirism, and along the way, he gets in many shenanigans. Many shenanigans. It's a long, deep, intricate plot that leads to the player getting to choose whether or not Kain sacrifices himself in the end to save the world, or become a Dark Lord Ultra Vampire ruler over all of Nosgoth. Which brings us to Soul Reaver. You don't need to play Blood Omen to understand Soul Reaver, but it helps a lot and you get a lot of great and interesting lore and backstory. Soul Reaver picks up after the bad ending of Blood Omen, where Kain damns the world to ruins and vampires are now the big baddies in charge. Only the world is falling apart a lot more than he anticipated. Kain is king and all bow to his will. One day, a lieutenant of his named Raziel presents himself to Kain and does the unimaginable. He spreads a pair of wings. Kain sees this and says to himself, "This motherfucker seriously evolved wings before me? Ah, hell nah." So, to reward Raziel, Kain rips his wings off and casts him into the Lake of the Dead, where he lies dormant for 1,000 years. Until he gets woken up by an elder god that's been hiding beneath Nosgoth this entire time. And thus, Soul Reaver begins. Now, onto the review. So, when Soul Reaver first came out in 1999, I didn't know what it was or that it was a sequel to another game. I just remember reading in a lot of video game magazines that it had no loading times and a huge open world where you could freely explore. And that was a big deal back then. Most games were broken up into levels or sections, but Soul Reaver was just one huge map. I mean, the environment itself was a puzzle. I think I spent more time exploring Soul Reaver than I did any other game back then, besides Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which is probably my favorite video game of all time, now that I think about it. And I'm talking about actual exploration, not just looking for secrets. The only other game I could think of that had no loading times and a huge open world was Metal Gear Solid. But even then, it had parts that were blocked off once you got to a certain point. Now, technically, I know people could say, well, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 had bigger worlds. Yeah, but there were, loading screens into battle, going into mini games, other events. I'm talking Soul Reaver was just the same gameplay the entire way through, no loading times, one big-ass map. That was unheard of and unseen back then. This was during a time when games weren't in the mainstream and people weren't streaming speedruns. Like now, you can beat the Soul Reaver games in like 5 hours each, but back then, we didn't have video walkthroughs and the strategy guides only showed you where to go, not really what to do. I mean, they told you how to solve some puzzles, but you still had to figure some of it out on your own. And honestly, it was just more fun to get lost in a game back then. I know I sound nostalgic. Okay, boomer, get on with it. God. Younger gamers might find it either too frustrating or boring since there isn't a million enemies on screen. There's no map markers, no constant fucking chatter. It's just you playing as Raziel, exploring this beautiful, desolate wasteland to a great soundtrack and tons of atmosphere, while impaling vampires along the way. I mean, most modern games can't even come close to the atmosphere that the Soul Reaver games have. Except maybe Bloodborne, my other favorite game of all time. One of the major selling points for Soul Reaver when it came out, and its sequel, Soul Reaver 2, was that it featured a world-shifting mechanic in that when you run around in the real world in the game and a puzzle seems like you can't solve it or like you're stuck, you can shift into the spectral realm and there's a whole new set of puzzles and pathways that seemed like they were blocked before are now suddenly opened up. It's kind of like exploring two worlds at once in the physical realm when you're Raziel, and in the spectral, spiritual kind of ghost realm, since he's a soul reaver and he feeds on souls instead of blood, which is part of the lore in this game. So yeah, really, it's a kind of fun gameplay mechanic to keep you always on your toes, always looking for new ways to get through an area, and part of the reason why I was so drawn to it and kept coming back to these games. The open world itself, well, the best way I can describe it, speaking of Bloodborne, is what the game series more people know about, Dark Souls. And I wouldn't be surprised if Soul Reaver influenced the Dark Souls games, honestly. It has the same interwoven level design with portal gates instead of bonfires, and the more you explore, the more you open up the world. So the only difference is that you can't level grind in Soul Reaver like in Dark Souls. Just remember, Soul Reaver came out first. I mean, really, Dark Souls took a lot from the Soul Reaver games, except for the combat. And I'll be the first to admit that the combat in Soul Reaver 1 feels a bit floaty and imprecise, which makes the one-on-one fights kind of frustrating until you get the timing down. But remember, this was a PS1 game played with the D-pad, not an analog stick. Soul Reaver 2 fares a little bit better since the combat's a little bit more responsive and enemy hits kind of connect more and it's not as floaty. Still, it's not the best combat system, but it's better than Soul Reaver 1's. Aspyr, though, the same devs that did the Tomb Raider games, the remasters, I mean, that came out recently, which, by the way, are really fucking amazing, regardless of tank controls. Like, I'm having a lot of fun with those, and I'll be doing a review once I finish them. But here, Aspyr did a great job with the graphics tune-up, which, honestly, I'm glad that's all they did. Changing controls in a game like this could break it or create new problems like missing hitboxes or iframe issues. One thing I do wish they would have changed, though, not the controls, but the camera. Like most early 3D games, the camera follows the player until it doesn't want to. The free look on the right stick kind of feels a bit useless, since when you start moving again, the camera just resets. Like, no, I want to keep the camera over here, not over there. But you get used to it. Still, the overall gameplay is really fun, and the puzzles are actually kind of genius. It's nice to play a game where I can solve things without an annoying kid or a severed head throwing hints at me every 5 goddamn seconds. God of War Ragnarok. For those of you that can't solve puzzles well, you'll probably hate this game. But you'll also be missing out on one of the greatest narratives and storylines in gaming. Yup, the story is one of the best out there to this day. Now, I often talk about how I don't give a shit about story or plot in video games because most stories suck these days, and I play video games to play them, not watch a movie. Or video games stories, they start off good, but the sequel kills a character with a golf club and forces you to play as an insufferable piece of shit as a way to force empathy on the player. Oh, here comes Last of Us 2 fans. Great. Yeah, game was fun, but yeah, that ending was... I'd have fucking unalived her, whatever. They should at least given you the option if you wanted to do that or not. You multiple endings, but no, let her go. No, sidetrack. The entire Legacy of Kain series was written with care and some surprisingly deep ideas about destiny and free will. I mean, you don't even really get writing like that in books these days. Unless you buy my books, Hellverse, Shadows of the Abyss, and Hellverse, Bloodlines of Chaos, which are directly inspired by the Legacy of Kain games, Dark Souls, Dante's Inferno, Paradise Lost, and Imagica by Clive Barker. A little bit of Cabal in there too. Shameless self-plug, don't give a fuck. In fact, one of the writers, Amy Hennig, worked on the Uncharted games, my favorite games from Naughty Dog, before, well, we know who took over. Soul Reaver 1 and 2 are examples of games that are great when you measure them for the sum of their parts. Soul Reaver on the PS1 and Soul Reaver 2 on the PS2 were some of the best looking games for their time, and the remasters don't look too bad either. I actually like the simple, clean look Aspyr went for. The combat system, while it's no Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden, was serviceable, but not great. And some of the jumping, platforming, and traversal parts can be a bit frustrating since Raziel likes to randomly fall off edges. Not a skill issue, it's his foot slipped in the wrong little pixel on this part and now he's falling. Like, what? It doesn't break the game, but just know there's some frustration there. The music, though, is just phenomenal. It honestly has one of the best soundtracks I've heard still to this day. When I'm writing, I'll actually just put on the Soul Reaver soundtrack or the Bloodborne soundtrack. But yeah, Soul Reaver is one of them. And the writing is damn near Shakespearean. It's beautiful. It really is. I mean, it has some of the best dialogue to this day in any video game I've ever played.
Prodigal son, there is no returning for you, Raziel.
Zephan, your visage becomes you. It's an appropriate reflection of your soul.
And you are not his handsome Raziel anymore. His precious firstborn son turned betrayer. You have missed so many changes, little Raziel. Look around you. See how the human's weapon of destruction has become my home. Indeed, my body. A cocoon of brick and granite from which to watch a pupating world.
A crevice in which to cower, only scuttling from the shadows to devour a victim already ensnared in your cowardly trap. But you've made the mistake of leaving me unbound, and it is you who must succumb to my will.
Will, instinct, reflex action. The insect mind finds little difference. I warn you, brother.
It is nothing like, and I'm going to get shit for this, but I don't care, nothing like the modern New York City dialogue trying to pass off as Nordic in God of War Ragnarok. I swear, everyone in that game talks like they're in an episode of Sons of Anarchy. I love the God of War games, but Ragnarok was...
Between my ex-wife and my disgruntled former employee...
I expect you to bite my blue butt cheek.
I'm sorry, the writing was fucking horrendous. But yeah, when you put everything together in the Soul Reaver games, you get what I consider a total package. To this day, these are still some of my favorite games of all time. The only way I could be more excited is if Aspyr remasters Defiance, which is more of a Devil May Cry clone. You know, actually, I take that back. The real way I could get more excited is if the Legacy of Kain series comes back, but only if Amy Hennig writes the story. I don't trust a lot of these other current game writers these days. Now, there was a canceled Legacy of Kain game in the works called Dead Sun that was being made at one point, and honestly, I thought it looked fantastic. I don't know why they ditched it. The new protagonist with his oiled black skin, long hair, and death makeup kind of influenced how my main characters in my Hellverse books kind of looks like. I was like, shit, this got canceled? This is just too cool not to use. I'm not saying I ripped it completely, but it inspired me. In fact, this is what my characters actually look like. And hey, I even have a video of me painting these two. But yeah, when Dead Sun got canceled, an online game called Nosgoth came out. And, I mean, it kind of filled in the itch for Legacy of Kain fans, but that's not really what we were looking for. We weren't looking for a online battle arena, MMO kind of game. Like, this isn't what I play the Legacy of Kain games for. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Soul Reaver remasters. If you're okay with early 2000s gameplay and not being led around on a leash like a lost puppy, the Soul Reaver games are some of the best created worlds in video games. You won't find the most amazing gameplay, but this is one instance where the plot drew me in and the world itself was just too interesting to not keep exploring. Kind of think of it as Dark Souls Light. I will say this, Soul Reaver 2 has a bit tighter combat and the fighting feels more responsive. Going back to the Dark Souls analogy, the best way I can describe it is Soul Reaver 1 has combat that feels like Dark Souls 1, where it's just a bit floaty, but everything feels more grounded. Soul Reaver 2 kind of feels more like Dark Souls 2, where everything is kind of stiff and mechanical and the movement feels almost robotic, but more precise. So, take that as you will. If you're a fan of these games and you haven't gotten the remasters, you need to get them now. For everyone else, these games are well worth the asking price. Anyway, if you like what I do and want to see more, please hit that like and subscribe. If you don't and you disagree with anything I said, let me know in the comments. I'm just as snarky there as I am here. Until next time, take it easy.